What does the incantation Abracadabra have to do with malaria?
Goodnight Moon is a highly acclaimed and much-loved bedtime story, but why was it banned by the New York Public Library for 25 years?
What's cool? What's daggy? And who decides?
And did you know that the foolscap paper size was actually named after a fool's cap?
Hello and welcome to REMORANDOM, a celebration of everything interesting and a companion to the printed book of the same name. I'm Remo Giuffre.
And I'm Claudia Chanshaw.
Okay, so how's your maths, Claudia? I graduated law school in 1982.
Oh golly. Was I even born? Oh no, I was around in 82.
Oh, that's cute.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah.
while you're working that out, I went to every 2 years, there is a University of New South Wales Law School reunion lunch, and mine happened last week. And it was, not the whole group, it was just a sort of small table of 14 people. And it was good to see what people are doing. Very different to what I'm doing, I have to say. But there are many ways to be wealthy out there, darling.
Yes, there are. We just be creative and do our own thing. That is
the entrepreneurial right, the swings and roundabouts.
Paved to millions.
Anyway, the only gripe I had was that there wasn't enough talk about my latest project and the books. But too soon did I bemoan that, because lo and behold, a couple of days later, the couple of nice big orders for book sets came through from the very same people that I thought were, just
not listening
and ignoring me. Anyway, so that
see that's what we call in the game. That's the soft sell.
yeah,
That's nice. That's
yeah,
nice. Good for you.
I'm less subtle. What about you? What?
Oh, look, reunions, they always fill me with terror. Mainly because, what am I going to wear is the first thing. And then you get there and it's interesting because the people you hung out with, say at high school, you tend to gravitate to them again because that was your little clique, that was your group. And then
Yep.
you go off and talk to somebody else who wasn't in your group and go, geez, you're nice. Oh, but why didn't I talk to you before? So it's interesting. It's this sort of like little voyage of discovery. First you walk in and you go, I don't recognize anybody. That's the interesting
yes.
one.
For a school reunion once, I had to design prizes, and it was like the most unrecognizable person award goes to.
Yeah, my husband's friend went to his high school reunion, and he said he walked in and there were a couple of different function rooms, and he looked across and he saw all these old guys who were bald and a bit overweight, and he thought, oh, that's not our group. And he
That
goes
couldn't
down
be.
to the other room.
That couldn't
And
be
then
us.
he comes back and realizes, no, they've aged and they've spread a little bit around the middle, as we all have.
Well, you haven't, but I certainly
Oh.
have.
Well, seeing I wasn't born in 1982.
No one's going to believe that.
No, I know.
It's magic anyway. Magic. Oh, that's a good lead in
Oh.
for the first thing I want to tell you about, and that is the incantation Abracadabra. Have you heard Abracadabra? Don't talk about
course.
Bugs Bunny cartoons, please. But
I won't. Open sesame, the open Saskatchewan.
I knew that was going
Open
to happen.
sarsaparilla.
I know
You baited
exactly.
me.
I know that exactly the cartoon you're referring to. So these days, Abracadabra is like an incantation used in stage magic, but the word has an interesting history. The first known mention of that word was in the 2nd century in a book called Liber Medicinalis by the Roman physician Cyrenus Sammonicus, who believed in the power of abracadabra to make fatal illnesses go away. So to cure malaria, Salmonicus prescribed the word to be written on an amulet to be worn by the sick. But it couldn't just be written in any old way. It had to be written in a very particular way with the word abracadabra on the first line, and then underneath abracadabra with the one letter left off,
A
and
cut
the
off.
one
Yep.
under, two cut off, three cut off, all the way down to just the letter A. And so it was this kind of upside down triangle, which was this special way it had to be rendered onto these mysteriously healing amulets. So several Roman emperors thought to, bought this idea and used the incantation, but they were disparaged in later years. And in the 17th century, Daniel Defoe wrote dismissively of the practice of posting the word on the doorway to ward off sickness during the Black Plague. The gig was up. So the origin of the word itself is a combination of Aramaic and Hebrew words. Abra is the Aramaic equivalent of the Hebrew avra, meaning I will create.
Oh.
And kadabra is the Aramaic equivalent of the Hebrew kaduba, meaning as was spoken. So together the phrase means I will create as has been spoken.
I
Abracadabra.
see.
So
Abracadabra.
that thing that you didn't know before that now you know, and you can talk to
Abracadabra,
other people about.
as what was spoken by prestidigitators.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, presto.
Open
Prestidigitation.
sesame. Oh no, sorry.
Here you go. Get me started. Open that gorilla. Okay. Now
Can you
we're
match that? Can you match that?
I can match that. We're going to move on to bedtime stories now. This
Okay.
is from Memorandum, of course. These lovely, lovely little snippets that we're telling you about, that amazing stories. I love this whole process. Remo, thanks so much for getting me on board. I really like this because
Oh,
I like
perfect for you.
learning.
You're a curious
I like learning.
cat.
I am a very curious cat. In fact, they used to call me question mark when I was in high school because it was a miss, why, blah, 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 blah. And they go, no, question mark.
Claudia again.
Maybe I didn't talk to you at the school reunion. Huh? Anyway, so when I was little, I did have a favorite bedtime story, and that was Dr. Seuss's Sleep Book. And it was a beautiful book, gorgeous illustrations. And I'd colored in, and in the front of the book, I had, Claudia Shaw 1L, Claudia Shaw 2H. I had my primary school classes. Anyway, so I still have the book, and I'm sorry I scribbled in it. But there was a much-loved bedtime story called Goodnight Moon, and that was written by Margaret Wise Brown, and it was published in 1947. And the author based the story on her own little ritual that she used to have every night. And she would say goodnight to all of the toys and the objects in the nursery that she shared with her sister Roberta. So it's really, really, really lovely idea. And it's a rhyming poem. And I'm just going to read a few lines. This is from Memorandum number 1, the red one. And this is just to give you an idea of this rhyming. It's almost like an incantation. We're talking about incantations. Good night, room. Good night, moon. Good night, cow jumping over the moon. Good night, light and the red balloon. Good night, bears. Good night, chairs. Good night, kittens and good night, mittens. Good night, clocks and good night, socks. And she goes on and finishes with good night, air. Good night, noises everywhere. So it's a gorgeous, gorgeous little book, and it's quite short. And it went on sale for $1.75 in 1947, but it didn't sell terribly well. And only sold about 6,000 copies. I mean, today in the publishing world, if you sell 6,000 copies, that's pretty good, isn't it, Remo?
Mm-hmm.
But
We
by
wish.
2017, it had sold 48 million copies. And it had been translated into French, in Chinese, Catalan, Hebrew, Russian, German, maybe even ancient Aramaic, who knows? And while it was much loved, the book was banned by the New York Public Library from 1947 until 1972. The children's head librarian at the time was Anne Carroll Moore, and she absolutely hated the book. And she preferred for children's learning, like the Once Upon a Time fairy tale and fables. And she didn't
Mm,
have any time for books that were about the everyday. But the book is still enormously popular. It appeals to children who are curious about the world, and it doesn't just have to be about fantasy and magic. And it's said that it's really one of the only realistic stories that has universal affection, just like a fairy story. So by saying goodnight to everything, it's reminding us that it'll still all be there in the morning.
mm, beautiful. Yeah, no, we were living in New York when, so our daughter was like 3
Mm.
and our son was born there. I guess this book, along with another Margaret Weiss Brown book called The Runaway Bunny, are very, people know them in Australia, but they're very, very well known in the United States
Mm.
and much, much, much loved. Sort of a little bit surreal. I know you recited some of it, but I like the bit that says, in the great green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of the cow jumping over the moon. And there were 3 little bears sitting on chairs and 2 little kittens and a pair of mittens and a toy little house and a young mouse and a comb and a brush and a bowl full of mush. You can probably hear a dog barking in the background there too. So,
And a dog who barked and a
and a
sky
dog
who
who barks
laughed.
when she shouldn't be barking. Uh,
And
No,
that's when
that's
a quiet old lady whispered, "Hush,
yeah.
hush."
Hush, Olive, hush. Um, yeah, no, thank you for that. And yeah,
Special.
it is a fave and very special. And I'm not surprised that it's been translated into those languages and has done so well and is a forever thing. Uh, uh, all
What have you
right.
got for me?
Well, funny, we were talking about reunions before.
Mm.
So, there's another reunion, the dreaded school reunion reminds me of my early school days here in Sydney. I went to an all boys Christian Brothers school, and in the early 70s, in 1973, there was a guy who joined the school from the US, had come to Sydney. His name was Bob D'Angelo, and he was
Bob D'Angelo.
very cool, right? So the school I attended, Waverley College, is on the hill, at the top of a hill that leads down to Bondi Beach and the other, surrounding beaches. So surfing was
Yeah.
very much part of the culture uh, in those days, as it is now. And anyway, Bob had that kind of fabulously peroxide blonde hair, was a great surfer. He was
Yeah.
definitely a very cool guy. You kind of feel it in your bones. But um, but there was a thing about Bob that was a little bit strange, and that was he wore this belt on his school uniform that was black and elasticized and woven with a heraldic clasp at the front and little sliders on the side. I don't know if you remember those belts, but
Mm.
they were the epitome of dagginess. Now, daggy is an Australian term that has no clear translation to other languages, but dorky, or I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but dictionary definitions of these words like cool and daggy aren't very satisfying because they use words like excellent or first rate.
Yes, yes.
So you really you need to understand them. You need to see they're better defined by their application and usage. So Bob was this cool guy, but the belt he was wearing was daggy until Bob wore that belt, because Bob effectively then sanctified that belt and cleansed it of its prior
Dagginess.
daggy association. It was enlightening for me as a young pubescent or prepubescent teenager who was kind of interested in these kinds of cultural, observations. And it led me to believe three things. And one is that, some people are naturally cool or uncool. Some things are inherently cool or not cool. But cool people can make things cool, but cool things can't make people cool. Anyway, I diagrammed it all up.
Of course you did.
I had to diagram it up in a sort of a decision tree. I'm going to hold it up here. This is in the orange memorandum, and there is the
I see.
the anatomy of cool. And see that little gold box there? There's the alchemy of Bob D'Angelo wearing, as a cool guy, cool person, wearing an uncool thing and making it cool. So that kind of impressed me with its magic and alchemy. And, indeed, there's so many examples you could just go on, and I'm hoping that readers are going to send them in via the contact form or the WhatsApp channel. But, John Lennon popularized the round wireframe glasses. I'm not sure
Cool.
that black turtleneck jumpers were all that sort of cool until Steve Jobs started wearing one every day. There's a classic Remo example of the Splade. I mean, some people are still referencing them as daggy, but I think there's a certain cool there.
Oh, yeah, they're cool.
And what about Crocs, for God's sake?
They're
Crocs,
not cool.
Well, I beg to differ. I think, well, okay, you're talking about the ones with the little things all over them, but I think that they are functional and they do a job that they're meant to do. And, they're not going to listen to any spurious fashionista.
Oh, and you can pop them in the dishwasher. They're dishwasher safe too. Did you know that?
They are alarmingly light, aren't they, when you lift them up? But
I don't know. I've never lifted one. I'm speaking purely from inexperience. Is the word daggy from that thing that hangs down from a sheep's bottom?
yeah. Actually, I wrote a story about daggy. It hasn't made it into print yet.
Okay, I'm waiting with bated breath.
Coming, a memorandum for May 2025. We
Okay.
look at the origin of the word daggy, but you're quite right. It has something to do with sheep's wool and poo, and never the twain shall hang around for too long. Dingle dangle.
Okay. I think we should talk about paper. Paper
Yes.
sizes, in
Paper
fact.
sizes.
Paper sizes. I mean, we're all wedded to our bits of paper. I love a bit of paper. I can't make the transition. Say, oh, you waste too much paper. Why do you print everything out? Do it all on your phone. No, I'm old fashioned. I'm old school. I like to read a book, and I like a piece of paper. Anyway, when we were little, it's always going back in time for me, but we used to write on quarto paper. You remember that? The
Yes.
paper was quarto size. And then the paper size changed in our lifetime, and we went from imperial to metric. And I always had trouble working out, those changes, quarts and liters and all that stuff.
Mm.
And do you remember your exercise book in that at the time had on the back the ready reckoner? So you could work out, okay, quarts to liters,
Oh, yeah.
imperial to metric. So I like that. And you could cheat in exams. You just flip your exercise book over. Anyway, so the ISO 216 standard that we use today is the international standard for paper sizes. And for us in Australia, it includes the A series. And we're not talking about Audis, but we're talking about A4, A3. And for us, it popped up in 1975. But the idea of it had been around since 1786, when a physics professor, Georg Christoph Lichtenberg, wrote a letter to his friend Johann Beckmann, and he suggested, as you do in these clever people's letters, the benefits of a height to width ratio, which is 1 to the square root of 2. Have I lost you? Sorry about that.
No,
Anyway,
I'm loving it.
all this time, I'm not mathsy, I'm not figures. All this time later, that's what we've ended up with. The bottom line is that what we've got now, and there are 11 sizes in the A series from A0 to A10. Now, we love, and I love, the A4 piece of paper. But in the United States, no, 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 they're not having any of this. No, thank you. It's still the US letter and legal sizes in paper in the United States. So how on earth did they come up with those sizes? So early paper makers used to dip wooden frame screens into vats of water and pulp to make paper. And the vat men would pull them out once they'd dried, and they ended up with these huge pieces of paper. And one of the common frame sizes was about 44 by 17 inches. You cut that into quarters, and that becomes letter size, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. And then there's foolscap. Did you know that foolscap is named after the fool's cap and bell watermark that used to be used from the 15th century onwards on pieces of paper of that size? Foolscap. Now, American restaurants are very big fans of foolscap. They love it, and that extra length that you get works very nicely for the daily menu. If you fold that in half, it's perfect for the cocktail menu. And if you fold that in half again, it's great for the daily specials.
Well, there you go.
Don't you
You know,
love that?
I love the foolscap bit because you hear that word, like I've heard that word
Foolscap.
10,000 times in my life, but I've never actually registered what
Where
I
it
was
came
saying.
from.
Where it came from,
Yeah.
foolscap.
A
Well, the
foolscap.
rustling that I was doing when you were talking was I was just, I had this,
You're
like,
making paper.
I had
It's a miracle. He's
I
made
had an
paper.
A4 bit of paper, which I then folded to make A5. So then the ratio of that side to that side is the same. And then A6, and then A7, and onward and onward. So, yeah, it does satisfy the mathematician neaty pie in me. And I really resent those Americans again for persisting with those arbitrary US letter foolscap kind.
Yeah. Well, I don't need to know about the exact measurements, but I do like that, two A4s equals A3. It's very neat.
Yeah,
Very,
it's super
very
neat.
neat. Yep.
Oh, well, here,
Well thought out.
I happen to have an A7 sticky notepad in my pocket. It just happens to have the words Remo.
Remo.
There you go.
Oh,
Mm.
fancy that.
Lucky my name
Gee
wasn't
whiz.
Colin. But anyway.
Lucky your name wasn't Aristophanes.
Okay, Claudia, that's all for this episode. I want to spend a moment to thank the people on the REMORANDOM WhatsApp channel. This week, especially, there's been quite a bit of activity, people suggesting topics for
Good.
the next book. And there's nothing for days, and then there's a wave of ideas. And sometimes if the idea is particularly exciting, I'll write it straight away. It's my favorite thing to do, is to get the idea in the morning and then send the link to the group in the afternoon and say, not only is it a great idea, it was so interesting that I absolutely needed to write about it today. So,
Wow. A man of action you are. You are such a man of action.
well, my next action is to cut us off. Just to mention, you can order copies of our books at remorandom.com and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch us in the flesh on Spotify or YouTube.
And we do want your comments. We'd like you to send your suggestions in. Maybe you've got those great ideas, and if you're not using the WhatsApp group, you can go to the website remorandom.com. Tell us your ideas.
Thanks, Claudia, simsalabim, and the rest of it, and abracadabra, and
Abracadabra.
may you live long and healthy without malaria.
Can't do it. Can you do it? Live long and
Bye.
No, I was trying to live long and prosper, but abracadabra.
There's lots
Ciao.
of hand movements for you people who can't see what's going on. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.